You had to deal with a bewildering patchwork of local constants and norms. It was actually the French Revolution and the administrators who came out of it that started to codify how we measure things. The standards they adopted were ultimately formalized in 1875 at a convention whose name you may recognize, the Metre, or should I say, Metre Convention. Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot, the show for analytically minded marketers. The standard that was set at that convention spread beyond France to most of Europe. It removed friction in commerce and everyday life. Engineers could spec out parts to the same tolerances. Pharmacists could dose reliably, no matter where they were shipping. Food producers could print consistent nutritional labels. Shipbuilders and container makers could agree on common dimensions. Architects and builders could order materials that actually matched what was on the blueprints. Over decades, that shared knowledge of measurement turned local guesses into dependable infrastructure. Today, about 95% of the world's population lives in countries that have officially adopted this system, the metric system. It solved disagreement about much. It replaced all those things and brought about trust. Now, businesses today face the same problem. The units have changed a little. Instead of meters and kilograms, modern organizations are trading in clicks and sessions and impressions, conversions, and even revenue. These are used in hallways and in boardrooms, and they empower decisions and budgets. If one team's conversion counts form submissions, and another counts purchase intent, and a third counts paid signups, you get the same mess that you had in Europe before all of this started. That's why, in this era, adopting a metric system matters. A single vocabulary of business metrics. Give everyone the same definition of revenue or LTV or ROAS. Everybody should be able to trace where those numbers come from. Noisy arguments will turn into aligned action. So we have to get beyond the current disparate marketing measures we have. It's actually the choke point that's preventing us from sharing dashboards across groups, asking bigger questions, and getting full bang for the money spent on our current analytics infrastructure. If we're going to keep our sanity, we must get on with metricizing our metrics, going down a path where these metrics are treated as standard units. It'll open up things for our own organizations and maybe even the economy as a whole. Our guest is a proud Swiss Canadian, a technologist, and an entrepreneur. In 2001, he co-founded analytics company Clipfolio, one of whose software products aims to address metric management. Note that I'm having him on today to give his personal perspective. There's no sponsor or affiliate relationship here. When he's not working in or talking about analytics, you'll find him cycling in the city that we both call home, Ottawa. Let's go talk now to Allan Wille. Allan Wille, welcome to Funnel Reboot.
Thanks, Glenn.
I'm really glad to have you on today, and we are going to talk about the ways, plural, that people have been using to get data, to give them insights. And I think it's fair to say that we've all been on a journey in how we do this. For some of us, it's only been maybe we stepped in when there were already some advanced tools in place. But for people who are your and my generation, it was likely a raw file that got pulled out of a system and that got dropped into a spreadsheet. And so I want us to talk a bit about how well that went and what we learned while we were in that mode of using spreadsheets to slice and dice data. What do you remember from those days?
Glenn, that's a great place to start because I don't think those days still exist today. I think an Excel file or a CSV file out of somewhere, either you're doing it yourself or you're asking your web analyst or your data team to do it. I think that is probably still the most tangible way and probably most popular way that people are still working with data. And honestly, there is nothing, absolutely nothing the matter with that because you get your hands dirty. Most people are super familiar with Excel or Google Sheets. There's a bit of understanding and wrangling the data. And I actually think that's really important from an understanding point of view. How many times have you been looking at raw data and you notice something that is not correct? And you're doing that because you're actually looking at this CSV file. You're looking at the raw export of data and you realize that there's something not quite lining up here because you're playing with it. You're in the weeds. You're dancing with it. And I think some of that is sometimes lost. Listen, I love analytics and data viz like nobody's business, but I think
Yeah.
some of that is lost when you put it inside of a system and you're not questioning that raw file. I don't know. I still love a good CSV export and getting stuff into Excel and playing with it. I feel like I'm more one with the data often. Listen, you won't see the trends, you won't see the patterns as well, but there's nothing, we shouldn't assume that's a bad thing. I think that's going to continue. I think it's a great thing. And I think people actually feel pretty safe doing it because they know the tools.
Yeah. Time and place.
Yep.
So I think there is a sense of it's temporal, right?
Yep. Yeah,
Whatever I
absolutely.
caught is as of the moment
Yep.
that I
Mhm.
downloaded it, and it's evanescent. There's
Yep.
this kind of
Mhm.
flightiness to it, and we're now in an age where we would like to have machines reading data.
Yeah.
And because a CSV kind of drops out of the sky, and there were a lot of things that the person who maybe set up a view inside of a platform
Mhm.
to get it, none of that context travels along with it.
Oh, 100%. It's the list of what's wrong with that scenario is as long as the list of what's awesome about that scenario.
Right.
Yeah. What's worse is that, yeah, you're right. I've asked the data team, can you give me a CSV file with these filters, right?
Yep.
This date range. I get it. There's the context is lost. I give it a file name or I share it with somebody else. Before you know it, it ends up on somebody else's desk. It's a mess. And you've got various different people running around with their version of what they think is the truth, and it couldn't be further. So,
Yeah.
yes, I think I love it. People are going to continue doing it, and I encourage it, but it's also fraught with danger for sure. I think all of that stuff is very true.
So there's different ways that people are now getting, and now we're getting into, let's say, time series data, maybe
Yep.
marketing data, where I'm
Yep.
getting it from several different channels, and I
Hmm.
want to compare that cross-channel approach. So some great tools that involve APIs, and they
Yep.
have been convenient as all get out. They have a ability to set up a pipeline, push that data, or pull it if I'm, let's say, in a Looker Studio or a
Hmm.
Tableau, can connect a visualization tool and I can say, tell me whatever there's going on over the last 3 days, and I want to see how it's all doing. Now, it's been great. What's your take on that by itself?
I think it's great. Everybody exists in a certain data maturity spectrum, right?
Mhm.
And you're traveling along that at the beginner stage. You're using Excel files and you're copying, pasting that into PowerPoint or Google Present. Then you start connecting to APIs. Or you're using a time series database in Google Ads or Google Analytics. That's probably
Yeah.
the most popular analytic tools that marketers and decision makers got to know. Every tool's got Salesforce has got some dashboards and HubSpot's got some dashboards. All of those tools, they presented data in a slightly more mature way than an Excel file. And yeah, you can, and they've got APIs, REST APIs, or other ways of fetching that data. And then
Yes.
when you start maturing, maybe that data starts flowing into a data warehouse or eventually a data lake and then semantic layer, et cetera, et cetera. So we can get into that. But I find a lot of companies exist in this hybrid nature of they have some spreadsheets, and maybe those spreadsheets are actually just lookup files that they use to merge and enrich their data. Totally
Hmm.
fine, totally fine. I find there's tons of companies going out and fetching data via a REST API, pulling that back, visualizing it, comparing it against other things, creating calculated metrics. I think that's great. I actually think There's a discipline and a maturity around there. As soon as you go against any kind of machine, you're getting a little bit more consistency. With the CSV file and the Excel file, you're going against a human who has created this. You're going to put all sorts of funny things in that spreadsheet that will mess up the data. But if you're going against an API, APIs change, but they change relatively slowly. So you can be fairly consistent and confident that the data that you're pulling back can be trusted. It's going to be the same. So I think there's lots of companies out there that do that. I think that's going to continue being that way. We've worked with thousands of companies that have done that. We do that ourselves. So
Yeah.
I think APIs are a great way to fetch data and bring that
Yeah.
back in a consistent way.
I like the caveat you gave of they do need to be updated. We should also remember that they were normally taken by someone who looked at what the end users said they needed, and they purpose built a
Yep.
dashboard grabbing from endpoints. And for those who aren't familiar, let's say that there's a large system, they will break up their system's data into several different places where you can look at the data almost coming at it from a different angle. The APIs, there will be multiple APIs. So what I'm saying is
Yeah, yeah.
somebody cherry picked the
Mhm.
ones that they thought would work for that dashboard.
Yeah,
Times change, people come and go,
yeah.
and over time people are wondering, is this dashboard still fitting the
Mhm.
business objective that we had in mind? And I find that people get cornered sometimes. Do you agree
Mhm.
that either the model that somebody said, oh, you need a data model to dashboard, or the dashboard itself drifts off to the side, and it's no longer really doing it for us?
Dashboards are living, breathing things. You really have to keep working at it and seeing if it's relevant and which part of the dashboard or which metrics or KPIs are you no longer using, or where are there conflicts. If you are an organization that is bringing data back with an API, do the two APIs that you're looking at, do they have the same dimensionality? Could you actually put them on the same dashboard? Do they have the same time grain flexibility? So there's lots of, again, like that's that data
Yeah.
maturity spectrum, right? Besides that, to your point, whether you have a spreadsheet, an API, or a warehouse, the dashboard itself has got to be revisited, critically revisited. Are you using the things on that dashboard? And if not, remove them or modify them. I think
Yeah.
that's super critical. And more often than not, people just let it slide. And eventually you're in some meeting that you have every single Monday morning. And you're
Right.
like, guys, are we still using this dashboard? We're not making any
Yeah.
decisions off of it anymore.
Or my view of the world, this dashboard is no longer jiving.
Right, that's
Like,
right.
I don't feel like I'm getting
Mhm.
answers. As a matter of fact, I'm spending more time asking, why does that number look like that? And I know we're speaking to a non-technical audience, but there's notions of the people that have to put these together. They had to listen to us say, let's say we were dealing with meta ads, and we
Mhm.
said, I want to really know in a drill down way how my meta ads are doing. They heard from that, take the ads level, and ads get rolled up into ad
Yeah,
sets get rolled up into
yeah.
campaigns get rolled up into accounts. You're probably at 10 to 20 times as much information that is being pulled just to
Yeah,
get that
yeah,
ads
yeah, yeah.
thing. And there's baggage,
But let's
right?
talk,
Bigger
let's
quotas.
yeah, absolutely. The concept, I thought where you were going was you ask somebody to create that dashboard for you or that metric for you, like some analyst or a technical
Yep.
person. I think here's the other reality. Often these companies, or more specifically, these departments, they don't have access to a data person. The person building the dashboard, especially in smaller or mid-sized organizations, they're figuring it out themselves. Which, and again, there's something cool to that too. Just the same way that you got your hands dirty with the CSV file, the advertising decision maker who wrangles with the Google Ads
Yep.
API, and it's not easy. They'll make mistakes and they'll be frustrated.
Right.
But if they get it right and then they figure out how to say, I only want this, or I want to filter it like that. The fact that the decision maker is also acting as the technical person, nothing's getting lost in translation.
True.
There's
Yes.
something
And
nimble.
Yeah, you can't relinquish your responsibility, even if there is a technical person
Yeah,
around.
totally. APIs have gotten easier. The documentation has gotten easier. Tools have made it easier as well. Like we've got in our tool, we've got a query building tool, which means that you don't have to write REST queries,
Hmm.
you do it visually. Things have become a lot easier. And again, we get back to that data maturity spectrum. The big company that has a centralized data team, yeah, they're going to do it for you. But guess what? You're going to lose something in translation, and it's
Yeah,
probably going to take longer for the turnaround to happen. Those mid-sized companies that are nimble, growing, always short on cash, where the marketing director or the advertising specialist is, I just need it. I need it tonight. They're
right.
going to go and they're going to figure out the API.
Yes.
And yes, it'll be in the middle of the night at 11 o'clock, but they will figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eventually
Now,
they'll
I
dream.
I love where I see that kind of initiative, yet
There is a yet.
when you have more than one of them, we start to get a little bit of divergence, only a
For
little
sure.
bit. I'm going to share with you, I do some work with agencies, and I hope none of them are listening to this because we just recently had a problem where two different people who had taken that initiative were zooming along trying to analyze one. This is on the client side. The client side was looking at, we both said we want to know roughly return on investment.
Yep.
And the agency people were looking along very acutely at return on ad spend. Okay, so
Yep.
for
Yep.
anybody listening, that's simply your revenue divided by the pure ad cost. The client said they were also looking at return, but what they were actually looking at was MER, management efficiency ratio, normally revenue minus all marketing costs. For this situation, that is the ads plus the agency fees. And the two were diverging. It was getting very frustrating because they both thought that they were talking about exactly the same thing. Now, you had mentioned earlier you've got to have people who are working together. The word I normally hear associated with that is governance. So tell me a little bit about, we haven't brought that up yet, but tell me what happens if we just let things continue going, a trail that I've blazed in the jungle, and then I leave it for 6 months, and the jungle overgrowth just keeps going.
Yeah, yeah.
What ends up happening without governance?
You have anarchy, right? The wild. And listen, I am somewhat of a fan of, let's call it governed anarchy. I think
Creative
anarchy,
tension?
exactly, it breeds innovation. But you're absolutely right. I think you can get into situations where you've got two different people that are doing divergent things and they may think it's the same thing because they
Yeah.
haven't clearly defined the terms that the business uses. Or maybe the terms are the same. Maybe they're both talking about MER. The data source from which that data comes is different. So I
Yeah.
think there's discipline at every stage of the game, right? Where's the data coming from? When was it refreshed? Are there any filters applied to it? What is the term that we're actually talking about? And what does the company believe that term means? So there's discipline all along. And you're right, people call it data quality and data governance. And there's a really good discipline, and a lot of study has gone into that whole area. And I think for the most part, that's something that is fairly well understood. Maybe not well practiced enough, but it is certainly something that is understood. And there's teams out there that think about that. And by the way, data governance also gets into who has access to certain data sources and privacy and security, but it also has a lot to do with the data quality.
We're not dealing with the
Right,
privacy side today, but
exactly.
please go speak with your legal team and do also keep them in mind.
But then at the business end of the spectrum, it gets more into what are the words that we're using? How do you define this? Do I trust what this number means? What's the data lineage? Where did that data come from? Do I trust it? And I
Yeah.
think so much of why numbers fail in organizations just comes down to trust. Trust inside that whole pipeline. From where the data came, from the filters, the definitions, who built this thing, is it relevant to us? All of those things just have to do with trust.
Yeah. So we begin with, I'll call them static metrics, revenue, spend, clicks, sessions, conversions. These are pretty cut and dried.
Yeah,
Yeah, yes, like
base
you said,
metrics, numbers,
base
numbers.
metrics.
Yep.
Those are wonderful. But to make things really useful on a business layer, what we all do sometimes even without thinking, is we combine metrics together. We decide that we want to make a KPI, but it's actually helpful when they say profit. I remember being taught there's this term EBITDA, which they go by, and they use in words, like you said,
Yep.
a way to break out what it is. So it's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
Yeah, EBITDA is a lot easier to say, but you're absolutely right.
Got a prize for getting
Well,
that.
you got it, Glenn.
But my point is, it's a math formula. Or you take a management expense ratio, revenue minus ads minus, I'm sorry, revenue divided by parentheses, ads plus marketing fees.
Yeah.
Those are base metrics, but
Yep.
so that when we make a ratio out of it or whatever we
Hmm.
do with it, we make a calculated metric. And as you said, people put trust in these numbers. They're literally
Hmm.
Monday morning, I'm looking, how's my business doing? And this is something that I think is eroding trust in numbers.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you just said until recently, because for better or for worse, it's the dawn of AI that is forcing us to think about words.
Crazy.
The ontology and the relationships and the semantics of words. It's that meaning that an AI needs to actually be able to produce quality outcomes. So you're right.
Why did I want you to know why I said recently? Because for data nerds, it's been around for quite some time, but there's been a language that has been used to
Mhm.
talk to databases that is also, you can read it, so it's Word, but it is structured. Oh, I'm giving it away here. To query the database. So it's SQL, structured query
Yep.
language.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's, but many marketers, I certainly wasn't exposed to SQL any time until I got well along.
Mhm.
And it's when people see that they realize, oh, there is a way to do that. But why do we keep it buried in a script or in a database? That was one of my thoughts was why can't
Yeah.
that be something that is I should be able to if I've got a dashboard up on a screen in front of a
Yeah.
board, why can't we just double click on that thing and see have it
Mhm.
explode out to show us this is
Mhm.
how that metric got there. And
Mhm.
so this world of making it more visible, making the
Yeah. Yeah.
semantics common among us. How do you think we should be solving that?
Len, you're getting right into my wheelhouse.
Yep.
We've been passionate about metrics as a first-class citizen for many years now. I think we were one of the first companies to really think about metrics. Now, Looker with their LookML, their semantic layer, did some really, really good work in the early days as well.
So just
But
for those following along, that was a company by itself. They still
yep,
have that product by itself,
yep.
but many people know them far more for a, let's call it a baby
Mm.
visualization tool that they also built that Google bought. So
Yeah,
now
Looker Studio.
Google Data Studio.
Yeah,
Anyway,
exactly.
but Looker, keep going. They had a machine
Absolutely.
language
So
that
we were one of the early ones to think about metrics as this elevated way of analyzing business data. And really, this was a bit of a departure from where previous BI tools were really database centric. They were centric on the table or the view of the data. And you're right, SQL was the name of the game. That's how you got in and queried all your data. But it wasn't exactly a business friendly tool interface.
not democratic.
No, it wasn't. And again, very technical. It was nice and structured and all the rest, and it was amazing. But I think the next level to that is really what is that contract between the data team or the data side of the equation and the business side of the equation. And I believe that business contract, that contract is the metric. The metric on the technical side says, where does the data come from? What's the schema behind it? What's the lineage? What's the granularity that I'm slicing and dicing this? What measure and dimensions am I using? So the data side does have that sort of structured approach to what a metric is. The business side, in the meantime, has a really well understood definition. This is what EBITDA means. This is
Yep.
how it's calculated. If I go into a meeting and I say EBITDA, I can click on this thing and I can see the definition for EBITDA. Oh, I can see the calculation for EBITDA. I can actually even see where the data is coming from. So that trust, that contract between the business side and the data side exists. And I think metrics for us is that next generation of where the world is really going. And I think it's that sort of language that both sides speak that really is going to help that whole trust side of things.
You talked about the two sides, and I think without realizing it, I have seen multiple times there to be a clash between a data engineer and a end user. And it's not that either is being difficult, but when the business user is saying, we had been running on platform X and Y, and now we're going to add platform Z. Would you mind jumping into that SQL environment that you have? And can you add on to your
Mhm.
query how you're doing it? And then they do, the data engineer complies, but then they come along and they say, our people who are down funnel from us, the people who have to report on sales numbers, they didn't really like how some stuff wasn't being reported in
Mhm.
there. So can you like
Mhm.
add in a little bit? And this kind of death by a thousand cuts happens to
I
the
know,
data
I know.
engineer. And but I
Yeah,
think part of it is that they're cheek by jowl. There's
yeah.
no place in between. There's no DMZ where the because I know that the data engineer wants to serve up
Oh,
hot and
totally.
fresh data to please their end user. But
Yep.
when they are slaved to putting everything right inside of their own retrieval engine, it's not allowing that user to freewheel. It's also forcing the end user to be a taskmaster to
Yeah,
the data engineer.
yeah, it is. And I always get back to Wayne Eckerson. Wayne Eckerson, who I know is a BI analyst, and he's been looking at the business intelligence world for years. He constantly comes out with these numbers where business analytics has got this dismal 15% end user adoption rate. Like,
Oh,
why are end users not adopting BI tools? Meanwhile, you've got the data team that is constantly adding another data source or a table or making another dashboard that eventually nobody is using.
yeah.
So there's something broke.
So
It is defeatist. And I give a talk on this and wrote a blog on this as well. There's something broken in the
yeah,
analytics world. And again, we come back to trust. Until trust is established, and I think self-serve is a huge part of that. If the data team can serve up metrics, and it's starting to take shape, we're starting to see this term evolve. If the data team can serve up a metric catalog that has got EBITDA, it's also got all the base metrics that make up EBITDA. It's got revenue, it's got employees, it's got leads, it's got MQLs, it's got ad spend, it's got clicks, it's got everything. And if it can serve up this catalog, this buffet of metrics that the data team has said, yes, these are trusted, these are blessed, they use
verified.
verified, they use common dimensionality. So if you wanted to take clicks and look at MQLs, if you wanted to create
Yep.
a brand new metric, what is the MQL per click ratio?
Yeah.
You could do
Go
that.
nuts.
And the end user could do that. And I think that's where it really gets powerful because the end user doesn't have to go to the data team and say, oh, can you make me a MQL per clicks special dashboard? No, I don't
Well,
want
it's
to.
like work.
It all sounds like work. I don't fully understand it. And all the data team really wants to do is they want to serve up good quality data, right?
Yeah.
To the right people. The end user, they want to be as creative as they can, but they still want to use trusted data. So if they have this metric catalog where they can pick and choose and visualize them in a familiar way, I think that is actually pretty huge. So to me, it's less about don't ask the data team to build you visualizations or dashboards. That's not what they should be doing.
Yeah.
Their forte is to make sure that the data is trusted and the quality is there and that it's consistent. Your job is to ask questions and be creative and try to figure out how to make better decisions. And you can make your own dashboards using these consistent artifacts. So Again, I think there's a new world emerging. AI is partially to applaud for bringing us there now.
Yes. And before we get to that,
Oh yeah.
I want to make sure that our good old data engineers are given their due because this is as much a tool to keep their sanity as it is
Mhm.
for the user. Giving a metrics catalog, it exposes the query operations without altering the meaning of things.
Yep.
And I think
Yep.
that's powerful because on the
Mhm.
other side, referring back to what you said about APIs changing a little bit over time, or heck, us even dropping Redshift and switching over to
Mm.
BigQuery or doing some other plumbing level change. The beauty of a metrics catalog, correct me if I'm wrong, is that they can be liberated to keep on doing their thing, making pipelines, moving stuff
Yep.
from A to B, but they don't have to like now they've said what the standard is they'll meet, but they're free to do any changes that enable them to continue keeping that.
100%. If
Hands aren't tied.
and it's a good point, Glenn, because if you've got a user base, a business user base that is relying on a bunch of advertising metrics or profitability metrics, they want to make sure that they can every day, every week, they can look at those and trust that they're good and proper. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, you're right. If you have to shift from Redshift to Snowflake to Databricks or from an API to a warehouse, it doesn't matter. That contract of this is the data that's trusted still flows into that same metric. The business user, they don't see the underlying changes, but meanwhile, the architecture and the data side of the house is getting stronger and more efficient. But the business side has got that same level of continuity and trust.
The landscape is littered, I fear, with dashboards that either were built in good conscience and then they fell into disuse, or, and I've seen this too, dashboard projects that kick off with fanfare, but because there was no thought given to how it's going to live and breathe and be
Hmm.
governed
Yep.
over, or let's put it this way, everybody has this rigid idea of how, well, we have to make sure that we go to that source and track it like it's a piece of evidence all the way through to the visual end. And those dashboard projects, I know some that kicked off and it's been years and they still haven't launched. This is madness.
Now, I actually don't care if dashboards are temporary. I don't.
It shouldn't matter.
If you want to stand up a dashboard because you've got a campaign, you add a bunch of metrics to that, and then in 3 months you take it down because it's no longer relevant. Totally fine. What you shouldn't do is you shouldn't be standing up a whole bunch of similar metrics. There should be
Right.
one metric for EBITDA. There should be
Not
one
saying
metric.
for this campaign, we measured
No, exactly.
revenue this way.
Dashboards can be temporary, and in many cases they should be. And actually, they probably many of them survive way too long anyhow.
Long in the
Yeah,
tooth.
yeah,
Let's, I interrupted you when you were talking about AI and how there is a beautiful benefit when you do things this way where AI can come into it.
yeah. And we're not gonna posit on whether AI is good or bad, right?
Nope.
Because I think the jury is still out on that, right? Even
Mm,
though everybody's adopted it, the more articles I read about how it's stunting our development. I read an article the other day where it's like we're in the business of helping people make decisions,
yeah,
and yet there's now some studies that are saying that the use of AI is stunting people's ability to make decisions. Oh,
right.
it's too meta for me. Anyways, back to your question. Is AI pulling forward this idea, proper definitions and the use of semantics and meaning? It absolutely is. So that's definitely a benefit because as people have realized when they're asking questions of an AI,
Yep.
context, a common shared understanding really is everything. So when you ask the AI to give me my lifetime value of a customer,
Sure.
okay, does the AI know what that means? And maybe I say LTV instead of lifetime value.
Yeah.
Is there a shared understanding in the company of how we've calculated that and what that means? Can I also ask the AI, give me a definition for lifetime value and how is it calculated? So I think that encapsulation, and again, it comes down to that artifact is a metric, the definition, the calculation, the base metrics that make it up. All of that stuff is really important to any kind of an AI that is trying to make decisions. When you have most systems now have got some sort of a knowledge graph behind it where it says, okay, to use LTV, LTV is made up of these three base metrics, right? Follow
Hmm.
that knowledge graph. And these three base metrics are attached to these data sources or these databases or
Right. Here's where to go get them.
and they have these shared dimensions. And maybe it's owned by this user and that user. So that knowledge graph is context, again, that can inform the AI of trust. And I think all of those things combined, it's just if you were to ask me, you could come in on Monday morning and say, what was our click-through rate? And I give you a number, you're going to say, okay, I got that. It's all the AI, any AI relationship is just like talking to a person. It's,
Right.
do you trust me? I gave you the number. And then you may ask me, where did you get that number? I may say, oh, I got it from our Snowflake database. How did it get it? Oh, it got it because Fivetran had an API that brought it
That's
in, right?
right.
So that whole, you may ask those questions just to make sure that you have confidence. And I think the AI as well needs to have that graph, those definitions, and that ontology of words to understand what the person is intending to ask and how it replies to it. So I think AI
Hmm.
has actually really moved the needle forward.
I love that. And I love how you just used a conversation where, let's say, in a SQL environment, that's all syntax and it must
Yep.
be done exactly. But this, we still hit all the markers. You
Mhm.
still explained all of the components, but you just did it in natural language. And now
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
AI is, what I really love about that is the prospect,
Mm.
tell me if we're close, that we will be able to talk with our data because
Oh,
AI
oh,
can facilitate
totally.
that.
Totally. We're entering a non-deterministic world. When I talk to you, it's the same thing. You're not a machine. I'm not a machine. We're talking in an imperfect way, but hones us into giving the right answer.
Yeah.
With all computing up until recently, it's always been a very precise back and forth. That's how you get the answer. And now we're getting into a much looser relationship where we rely on context and creativity and experience to bring those answers forward. So, yeah, context matters.
So if we're Joe Average Marketer and we want to move ahead on this, I think there's one thing that I found as I looked at this that's important is that there are certainly products out there that are semantic layers all by themselves. And yet the landscape is also made up of companies that provide more than one piece of this. Can you take a second and maybe break it out for me, almost like an architecture diagram of what are the big pieces? Does a semantic layer have to be bought by itself, or can it sometimes sit alongside of what take me through all the pieces
Mhm.
from the BI
Yeah.
tool on in?
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually get that question a lot. Again, it comes down to that spectrum of maturity.
Yep.
So there's no right or wrong in this data stack.
Okay.
At some point, there's some source data. So whether you bring that source data back to a visualization tool direct, like
Yep.
via an API,
Yep.
that's totally possible. You could be as direct as that and just visualize. You could use something like D3, like a charting engine to visualize your
Hmm.
data. You could be as simple as that, or you do it in Excel. Maybe one level up from that is you're connecting to an API and you're bringing that back to a warehouse like Google BigQuery or Snowflake or one of the more standard databases. So you're using some sort of a tool that is fetching that data and you're populating your warehouse on a frequent basis. And there's tools out there that do that. Zapier is on fire these days. They're
Yep.
connecting everything.
You also mentioned Fivetran.
Fivetran, there's
That do is.
Supermetrics.
Yep.
There's a lot of tools that will help bring data into a warehouse. And that's a nice place to have it because then you've got one place where you can normalize, clean, govern that data. And different tools have got different flavors. The other thing that's nice about a data warehouse is that they're usually optimized for analytic purposes. So that means that if you've got a bunch of end users that are querying this data, they're usually fast. They're meant for this sort of frequent slicing and dicing and presenting of this data. So yeah, I'd say the next level in the maturity curve is bring your data into a warehouse. And then again, you can go straight from that warehouse to a viz layer, some sort of a tool that presents your stuff. Maybe you take that one level further and go to a metric layer, which is something like what we have. It's more of a hybrid approach where you're defining your metrics, you're defining the metrics, the relationships, and then you can use this metric catalog to visualize, to build dashboards, to share these metrics with your business end users. So that's a great way to, and a lot of customers do that because it's flexible and it's straightforward. It doesn't prevent them from going straight to an API. You can have APIs and a warehouse feeding this system.
Yes.
And then maybe the third, and it's growing a little bit in popularity, although it's had a bit of stumbles, is this idea of a semantic layer. There's tools out there. I think Snowflake is actually building their own, actually, maybe they just launched it, their own semantic layer. DBT, data build tool, they used to be called Fishtown Analytics, if that name is more
Yep.
familiar. They've got a semantic layer as well. And the semantic layer is basically an abstraction between your viz layer and your data layer. And it's doing exactly what we've just been talking about. It's defining your metrics, the relationships, the data lineage, the calculations, so that whatever happens in the data layer, the viz layer is protected. It's always consistent in using that. So yeah, the data stack, you can go through and you can mix and match. The most important thing is that you do something. You're tracking your
Yes.
metrics, be it in
Yes.
Excel, be it in some sort of a dashboard, or be it in a more sophisticated tool like a warehouse and a semantic layer and then a viz tool. Track your
Okay.
data
Yeah,
consistently.
and what you said, that don't get trapped up by the fact that some vendors will tackle more than one. So Snowflake,
Yeah.
evidently, I can use it as a data warehouse, and it's
Mhm.
got the ability to model the semantics of the data in the
Yeah.
database, in the data warehouse.
Yeah.
But then I can plug in an outside visual tool. So now, speaking of yours, which is Power Metrics, how would you describe it based on what we've just talked about?
Yeah, so ours is more of this flexible hybrid architecture where if you want to go from an Excel sheet, you can do that. If you want to go from an API, you can do that. In both
Right,
cases, you're defining your metrics and then
right.
exposing those to your end users. Or we can also plug in directly to a semantic layer. So we've got the ability to work with folks as they move throughout that whole data maturity journey. And I think that's important because it's not just as you move through the maturity journey, but it's also, you may have a very sophisticated system where you're plugging into Databricks and you've got your metrics defined in our tool and it's going out to end users. But then
Yeah,
all of a sudden, the CEO says, oh, we just started advertising on Reddit. I need metrics in my dashboard tomorrow. You're not going to have time enough to build that into your warehouse. So in that
right.
case, you just go straight against the API. So I think
Got
this flexibility is
right.
really important.
But you could show it side by side with all the
Well,
platforms you're already using
yes,
because
the end
revenue
users,
means the same thing,
100%,
conversions mean the
100%,
same thing.
100%. For the end user, whether the data team is going to an API, an Excel spreadsheet, or a warehouse,
Right.
doesn't matter. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Exactly.
It's this metric centric approach of
Yes.
let's not lose sight of the fact that is the one thing that everybody, tech side, business side,
Yeah.
board side, needs to be clear on, and that there is a way now to bring order to it. Well, and
That's
if
the common language.
that is that,
Hmm.
when you come down to it, that's the one thing that everybody shares. It's
Yeah,
like a public park. We all need to take care of it because it belongs to all of us.
totally.
Alan, if people want to find out about Power Metrics, if they want to find out about the stuff you like to talk about, your podcast, where should they go?
Sure. Thanks. And thanks, Glenn, for that. So if you want to check out the product, go to powermetrics.app. That's all about the product. Want to find out more about metrics? We've got this great community and open library called Metric HQ. So go to metrichq.org. That's open and it's free, and it really is a great resource. And then my podcast, I think you can get to it from parametrics.app. You can look up Metric Stack podcast as well.
What do people get?
Oh, so we have interviewed some amazing people on doing deep dives into metrics, how metrics have affected their business. We've looked at technical things, we've looked at business things. So there's probably about maybe 40 to 50 different podcasts on all sorts of subjects, but all around metrics and how people are using them to make better decisions.
And I will say that out of many organizations, public sector as well, it is when they get aligned on a North Star metric, that's when I tend to notice that seems to be the common element between places that just are cooking with gas. Your former guests on the show have said as much. It was when we figured out that was the one thing that mattered. And if we could optimize that, it was everything else paled by comparison.
And again, it's rallying around something that is trusted and understood by everyone. I think that is the key. Like a North Star metric has got to be simple, powerful, a rallying cry, and it's got to be trusted.
Thanks again for coming on the show, Allan.
You bet, Glenn. This has been lots of fun.
Yeah, I hope everybody has felt that they can take part in the talk about metrics, and thanks again for sharing it with us.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.